if you look at, there was this demon called Moloch, who used to demand child sacrifice. Now, this was it's not in well, Moloch is mentioned in the Bible, but like when you read all the kind of like stories around, that's not canonical. You got to understand, these parents were happily sacrificing their kids to this demon, thinking that they were doing the right thing by the kids, doing to the higher power and for society. So this idea that parents like, and again, those people believe the things that they did. You don't think that people aren't going to sacrifice their kids to trans ideology? It's a principality. Of course they're going to do that. It's going to happen. And you're going to get surprisingly high numbers of people who will happily sacrifice. And I mean this literally. I mean literally sacrifice their children. And because like I saw the neglect in the police. So it's not just, and neglect is separate from what I'm talking about. But I also saw people who were, actively sacrificing their kids to, like, they'd palm their kids out to get drugs. It's like, yeah, have sex with my kids, give me drugs. Like, again, they're sacrificing their children, something like that. Don't think that this won't happen, and don't think that it won't happen like on a surprisingly high level. Like I'm talking 5% of the population, 10% of the population will do that. Like, these demons are coming back. These principalities are real. Well, and that's the Catholic in me talking. The beautiful, and when I say that, I know that shocks people, but to put that, for the secular people who are still with us, when I talk about principalities and demons and stuff like that, now that we have artificial intelligence, all right, you can't deny that there is intelligence that's separated from human beings outside of a body that acts on human beings. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about a principality. So, Moloch may or may not exist as a real demonic form, but if you don't think that there is an intelligence, because this trans ideology is effectively an intelligence, like it has values, it acts a certain way in the world. If you don't think that this ideology as a principality, as a demonic force, isn't acting on you and your children, you're delusional. And the beautiful thing is now, like I can use this religious language that, 5 years ago, like not even 5-10 years ago, me as I wouldn't have understood. I would be shaking my head as like, what is that weirdo talking about? Principalities, demons. Like,
I think Jordan Peterson kind of doing the whole, because I've kind of like, I started before Jordan Peterson, before I found the Bible stuff, I was kind of like actually, because I was very into the Buddhist stuff where it's like basically you're meditating and sitting with yourself. So if you do that long enough, eventually your own shit starts to bubble to the surface and you start to become aware of it.
Yep.
And then, you have to deal with it. And I kind of started to realize, because my mother is really, really Christian. Like, let me say that again, very Christian.
Yeah.
And because I went through I was at Bible school when I was like 17. So we will have conversations. We agree to disagree for the most part, but we will have intellectual conversations. And it kind of started to dawn on me probably about 5 years ago that actually, if you get rid of the church stuff, that Christianity is basically it's a different mechanism, but it serves a very similar. There's an overlapping theme where it's like you are basically submitting your ego to a larger power. The story is kind of like there's lots of the same things that just kept flowing back, and it kind of started to dawn on me that while it's not the same thing, it kind of does, like it kind of serves similar purposes.
It functions in the same way.
You know what I mean? Like it kind of does.
It functions in the same way. Yeah.
And then Jordan Peterson started, like he's clearly converted to Christianity, whether he believes in God or not. I think he does, which is a new thing for him. I think his wife had a near-death experience with cancer or something, and that has changed their internal dynamic. And he's coming on hard with the Christian stuff now, very obviously. There's no doubt about it. But he also has been interested in group psychology for his entire adult life, and he's deeply educated on the subject. So and his whole maps of meaning stuff where he's talking about, you know, making meaning and old
Yep.
stories and fairy tales and things like that, serving really important purposes throughout human history and for, you know, morality and ethics and blah 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 blah. Him now coming into the Bible stuff and using his psychological, societal, cultural kind of education to kind of shine a light on, no, it's not just some, you know, sky god with a long beard,
Yeah. That's
you know,
Zeus.
that may or may not
Yeah.
exist. You know, like it's not, you're not wishing and hoping that there are practical, having faith in something is, you know, like you have faith in something whether you realize it or not. You can be intentional or you can not be intentional. Like him,
And that's why, like, initially, like, when all the new atheist stuff started coming out, like, and I got a lot of new atheist friends, and I said, well, it kind of looks like a religion, what you're doing. And they go, well, saying that atheism is like religion is like saying baldness is a form of, is like a kind of hair color. And they're right. It's like, no, we are saying, we're postulating that there is no God. You're not taking us on what we're saying. Like, please accept what we're saying. And I do. But Peterson and you have nailed it. It's like the fact that you don't postulate a God doesn't mean that you're not going to react in a religious pattern. In the same way that the Buddhist pattern, although it's you know, it means and plays out in very different ways than Christianity, it's still a religious pattern. It's a pattern of worship. It's a pattern of postulating something and prostrating yourself before it and aiming for it. So it does. So it has its saints. Buddhism has saints. It has its idea of like good karma. It has its sins. It has all the, and so incidentally, there's you know, Atheism Plus, which is, you know, the kind of like where new atheism is going. It's so funny because they got these forums, and they're actually running in Cairns here for a little while too. And they used to try and get like old churches and stuff like that. So you get all these atheists together, and they basically have a mass. They'd have a mass. So they'd have a reading, and then they'd discuss it, and then they'd sing some songs. They'd, you know, do all this stuff. It's like, dude,
what songs do atheists sing?
yeah, well, I mean, God knows, you know,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
like, you know, they kind of like, you know, they get together and they get to the International, maybe, I don't know. But like, you know, you'd see it online and they're doing this. I was like, dude, that's a mass. Like, if you think that that's not a religious pattern of behavior, like just because you're saying I don't believe in God does not mean that it's not a religious pattern of behavior. Again, I'm accepting your axiom as best as I can.
Yeah.
In discussing things on the way that you're saying, you know, this is what you believe and this is what you hold. I get it. But like, if you don't see that that's not a religious pattern, you're blind. Like, you're not the rational person that you think that you are. The gap between your self-image and the reality, like, you're living a lie. It's just like,
Well, you're lying to yourself and to
You're-
everybody else around you as well.
exactly.
Like a lot of the woke stuff has, I don't, it's not as comprehensive as like a traditional religious, you know, like kind of body. But in a lot of ways, a lot of this woke leftist stuff, communist stuff, it all really fulfills the same, you know, like it's trying to explain why we're here, what we're for, yada yada yada. Feminism does the same thing in a lot of ways. Like it kind of is a religious belief, like it's very ideological, and people that are
Yeah.
that people that want to believe it don't necessarily see that that's what they're doing. But
For me, it clicked when I watched Black Lives Matter here. So you get these people, like, so they got together in a march, and they said, well, it was just a march. They walked along, they marched for a little while, then they chanted, then they stopped, then they kneeled, then they got up, then they chanted and they marched. And as a Catholic, I'm sitting there going, yeah, I've seen that behavior before. Like, that's a ritual. And again, it has all the elements of mass. It's going to mass. Basically, those people were going to a woke mass. They all got together. They were communing together. They were motivated by a spirit. They're all excited by each other's company. They're all like, oh, yeah, we're aiming towards this higher goal. They engaged in rituals. They chanted. They marched. They did all of these things. and yet they mock me. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, and you see them, like you see at the trans rights places where they go and they, like, TERFs will get, like, women will get together and hold a let's women. Well, actually, Auckland was awesome for this. Melbourne kind of was, but they didn't. They held the protesters back a bit further, so it wasn't quite as obvious. But like the people that, like, the trans rights activists that that protest, that would there to counter protest, kind of have these, you know, like, they kind of almost have these religious kind of, like, heightened kind of out of body kind of experiences where they
Oh, yeah, speaking in
like
tongues.
the
Yep.
most outright, like, they manifest the most outrageous behavior because they are with their gang and feeling empowered, and they get a little bit high on the power of, you know, like,
The spirit is like those Pentecostal. Like, I'm not a Catholic. Sorry, I'm a Catholic. I've only ever been to a couple of the Pentecostal things where they go along and, like, the pastor will come up and hit someone on the head and they'll fall on the ground and start twitching and stuff like that. It's what the fuck? Like, you know, it's like, I don't know where that comes from. Like, but like, that's what it reminded me of. Like, when you see that kind of stuff. And again, like, no disrespect to my Pentecostal cousins, but yeah, there it is. It's like the spirit is in you, like, and it's like, yeah, and the trance, it's the same thing, it's the same pattern. Like, I've seen this before.
Yeah, you know, there's one there was one, like, self-ID, well, dude that had a walker and had long blonde hair, and he had a walker, and he was, like, charging at, like, basically from here to, you know, maybe 2 or 3 meters away, this woman that was quite a bit smaller. She wasn't tiny, but she was quite a bit smaller than him, and he was, like, charging her with his walking frame, and he was like, "Witch, witch, witch," and the look on his face was like,
Demonic.
he was barely aware of what he was doing, like,
Demonic.
just
Yeah,
like, you know, totally off his head.
people get possessed. Like, it goes back to this idea before. Like, I'm not suggesting that there's definitely, but like, if you allow an idea to possess you, it takes over you, and you've lost your personality. It's possessed you. Like, you've invited it in. It takes control of your body. It pays out like a medieval possession. That's why they're doing that. And again, like, to put it, this is one thing I love about these times, because we're starting to understand that there really are these external intelligences that work on people. And the way I explain it to people is like talking before about Santa Claus. It's like, of course Santa Claus exists. I mean, and I say that to my atheist friends, and they go, "Yeah, well, you do believe in, Sky God." I say, "Well, that's Zeus." But like, all right, I'm not saying that, Fred Smith down at the shopping center who put on a thing is a person that I'm not saying that there is a person dressed in red that flies around in a sleigh pulled by reindeers that delivers presents to everybody. I don't think that that's true. But that's not the same thing as saying that Santa Claus doesn't exist, because come Christmas time, whether or not you can see a manifestation of Santa. Again, that's not the entity that flies around. That's a different thing. But the spirit of Santa Claus can act on you. It's like, ho, 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 ringing the bells and giving out presents and stuff like that. You are being influenced by an external idea, an intelligence that existed before you were born and will exist after you die, that is influencing your behavior.
So in some real way, Santa
In a
Claus
real
actually
way.
exists.
And you can be possessed by the spirit of Santa in a positive way. So like, if someone was like really, so you got one of those, the shopping center Santa Clauses that was really getting into character, man, like method acting. And it's like, dude, well, that person could totally allow themselves to be possessed by the spirit of Santa and become the very incarnation.
I know a whole heap of single mothers on the pensions that allow themselves to kind of allow themselves to become influenced by the spirit of Santa in a really negative way come Christmas, because they spend way more money than they actually have on giving their kids everything that they never had at Christmas time. It's like, you're going to be in debt for the next 6 months. You're going to pull yourself out of the hole just in time for next Christmas. Like,
Exactly.
because,
That's a possession. So there's an intelligence, a principality that exists. People get it.
Yeah.
It's 2023 and we're back in medieval times. So we can talk about demons. We can talk about angels. We can talk about principalities. So when you're in the Bible, like I remember as a kid, I'd be sitting there reading the Bible. And again, even up to, recently it was 5-10 years ago, it's principality. I don't even know what that means. Like I just skipped over that bit. So well, I get it now.
Yeah.
We're back in medieval times, bro.